Dear friends, students and learners, I am Shashank Srivastava from School of Engineering and Technology, Indira Gandhi National Open University. So till now we have discussed the ferrous and the non-ferrous materials in the previous sessions, and from this session we are starting a new unit, which is the unit number 3 under the block number 1 of your course. So this is a different module, and it is named as ceramics, refractory and abrasive materials. So what will be the objectives of this unit I am giving you, and this will be the objective of the whole unit, and it will comprise of various modules, and most probably it will be around 3 to 4 modules. So this one is the very first one. So the objectives are here. The first one is to identify properties that are required to be present in a material for high temperature applications. Then you will have to understand the basic structure of materials employed at high temperature. Further, you will know about the materials which are employed for refractoriness. You will also know about the refractoriness, and you will know about the elemental materials having high melting point. Further, you will understand about the abrasive machining and why is it needed. Then identifying materials with abrasive property, and you will know the structure of the abrasive tools and wheels. And finally, you will get to understand the structure, properties and application of glasses. So these were certain objectives which you will be able to learn in this unit. So the introduction about this unit, we will discuss about the situations of high temperature which arise in practical life. So the very first one is like the furnaces which we use for various purposes, like we learnt in iron ore extraction and then steel and all, we were using furnaces. So these are meant for heating and melting metals and alloys. Then we have boilers for evaporating water. So all these are high temperature applications. Some others like the combustion chambers for burning liquid and gaseous fuels, and ladles for holding liquid metals, which we have learnt earlier also. And the re-entry vehicles, like you must have seen the space shuttles which go into the space, and when they are returning you must have seen them. So these are called the re-entry vehicles, and there is a very high temperature in the upper part of the atmosphere. So all these are high temperature applications. And further, the blades of gas turbine are also a very good example of structures which are subjected to high temperature, whether it be steam turbine or whether it be gas turbine. So in engineering practice, it demands production and use of materials that shall be able to withstand such temperatures while maintaining their properties, integrity and dimensional stability. So we have to look for such kind of materials which can withstand such temperatures, high temperatures, like there are 2000 degrees centigrade even in the internal combustion chamber. Then there are refractories. These are those materials that can withstand such temperatures. So the materials which can withstand such high temperatures are known as refractories. And mostly these refractory materials are the oxides, carbides, nitrides and the borides. And it has been found that most elementary metals cannot be used for the purposes of high temperature applications. Why? Because they themselves melt or they become soft. But there are certain metals that melt at much higher temperature and they form high melting alloys. So these are the metals which can be used for such purposes. Like the temperature will be around 2450 degrees centigrade for the melting. So these are high melting metals, and they can be classified as refractory metals, and examples are like the niobium, molybdenum, tantalum and tungsten. Further, we will take up the abrasive machining in this unit. What are the processes, and these are generally used either for removing very hard surfaces or for producing very smooth and closely finished surfaces, or both. Then there are abrasive wheels which are made up of very small hard abrasive particles, and these abrasive particles act as a small cutter and remove very fine chip. So these abrasive materials used for making abrasive tools like the diamond, silicon carbide and aluminum oxide. Several inorganic materials known for temperature resistance actually are very brittle and they can carry only small tensile stresses. So these are not of very great strength in one sense, in the sense of tension strength, and so these inorganic materials are not very useful in the case of high temperatures, but they are used for their thermal and electrical resistances, and they are capable of being formed in several shapes and sizes. And such materials examples are like ceramics, cements and glasses. And how do we enhance their tensile properties? By fiber reinforcement. So when we are talking about high temperature, then we should also discuss about the thermal properties. So here are some of the thermal properties. So we know that all solids actually, when you heat them up, they will expand, and when you cool them, they contract. And the thermal expansion of solids is taking place because in the basic structures there are atoms which occupy mean position, but they are at a fixed distance from each other. In fact, these atoms are not stationary but vibrate about the mean position, which changes with temperature. So these vibrations in these solids are dependent upon the temperature. The distance between mean positions actually increases with increasing temperature and decreases with temperature. And such changes in the mean distance between the atoms will result in the expansion or the contraction, which was the first point which we discussed. Why on heating the metal is expanding and why on cooling it is contracting. Because of the change in the mean distance between the atoms, this is happening. So there is one terminology that is called the coefficient of linear expansion, and it is defined as the increase in length per unit length per degree rise in temperature. Meaning, suppose there is a specimen, then how much deformation or increase in length has taken place due to temperature, and that shall be divided by the original length and also by the degree rise in temperature. So then we get the coefficient of linear expansion due to the thermal effects. For decrease in temperature, same property will be regarded as negative. So if there is a decrease in temperature, then it will be taken as negative. The linear changes in three mutually perpendicular directions will constitute coefficient of volume expansion. So if you see the x, y and z direction and the specimen is three-dimensional, then there will be linear changes in every direction. And when we account for all these three, then it will be called the volume expansion. If the coefficients of the linear expansion in three orthogonal directions, like I told you, x, y and z, all three axes are at 90 degrees to each other. So if these coefficients are not equal in all the directions, then they are not isotropic. If they are equal, then they are thermally isotropic. The thermal expansion is zero at absolute zero temperature and is generally related to specific heat and melting point of a substance. So thermal expansion, if you have read in chemistry, the absolute zero temperature was minus 273 degrees centigrade. So at that point it is said that all kinds of vibrations and atom movements are zero. So it is absolute zero. So from certain kind of experiments, it has been found that total volume change on heating between absolute zero temperature and the melting point is same for all elements. Whatever may be the element, it will be same, total volume change. So what inference can we draw? The inference is that coefficient of thermal expansion is low for high melting point solids and vice versa. Certain properties we shall discuss now of solids. Most solids that are used for high temperature applications, that is refractory materials, have linearly varying thermal coefficients. So most of them have linearly varying thermal coefficients. There is a linear relation. So here in this graph you can see the thermal expansion of the refractory oxides as function of temperature. So on x-axis you have the temperature and on y-axis there is a linear thermal expansivity. So you can see here that for most of the materials, as discussed earlier, the graph is somewhat linear. Only two types of metals are there, like you can see SiO2. So it doesn't have a linear type of change. Otherwise, most of them have a linear change, like MgO you can see, Al2O3 you can see. So this is the thing from this graph. The coefficient of thermal expansion actually is a very important consideration while designing a structure so that we can operate at high temperature. The restrictive deformations will cause forces to act upon the part and thus induce stresses. So when you heat it, like we have read earlier, that when we heat the solid, it will expand. So suppose somebody restricts this expansion is also the deformation. So what will happen then? Then stresses will develop, because the natural tendency was expanding but it has been restricted, so stresses will come in. During molding process, there are volume and linear changes after solidification. Like in casting, which we have discussed earlier also, there is the molding process. So in that case, volume and linear changes are there when solidification is taking place. So what we need then? We need to take care to maintain dimensional accuracy, and tolerance needs to be exercised. And this consideration becomes more predominant when or assumes greater importance in case of certain materials which are difficult to machine. So then it will become more important, because if we cannot machine, then after this molding process we cannot do anything. Then we have to be more accurate. And ceramics, however, refractory materials are certain examples in this case. The coefficient of expansion of plastics is also discussed here, and this coefficient can be controlled by addition of filler material, especially in case of plastics. In general, increasing filler material would decrease the coefficient. So if we are using the filler material, then the tendency of expanding will decrease, meaning the thermal coefficient is decreasing. Expansion in case of reinforced plastics tends to occur in the direction of the reinforcement. And there are many plastics which are used in conjunction with metals of common use. And it is of importance, we can note that use of fillers will enable the designer or the engineer to control the coefficient. So these fillers are meant for controlling the coefficient of thermal expansion, such that metal and plastic expand equally. Why we need equal expansion for both in case of mixture of metal and plastic? Because unequal expansion will introduce undesirable deformation and stresses, like I told to you earlier. So after that very first thermal property discussion, a general discussion, we shall now come on to other thermal property, that is thermal conductivity. So what it is actually the amount of heat passing through unit cross section of a solid material in unit time for unit thermal gradient. So this is the definition of thermal conductivity, and it is actually given by a formula, that is Ka delta theta by delta x. That is the formula of heat, and from here we can get the thermal conductivity also. So unit of thermal conductivity is SI unit is watt per meter per Kelvin, and other units are also there which is mentioned here, that is joule hour per meter per second per Kelvin. Heat conduction occurs from higher temperature to lower temperature, that we know, that is opposite to the direction of the thermal gradient. Thermal conductivity in the solid material is due to, why it is happening actually on the molecular level, if we go, then it is happening because of the elastic vibration of atoms or molecules, where energy is transmitted in the form of kinetic energy of vibrating units, and the second method is by the movement of electrons. So out of the two, the latter one, the movement of the electrons is the more predominating one. So these free electrons are actually capable of transmitting large amount of heat. Metals, what are metals actually? These are those solids which have abundant free electrons, hence they have good thermal conductivity. So in case of metals, we have a large number of free electrons, so that is directly proportional to our thermal conductivity. Thermal conductivity is also good. There are certain materials which do not have free electrons, and they conduct heat by mode of elastic vibration of atoms, meaning out of the two, the first one which we discussed earlier, the first one. So elastic vibration of atoms and molecules, and thus they are not good thermal conductors, but insulators, meaning the thermal conductivity is low. Thermal conductivity of pure metals over a moderate temperature as silver, copper, aluminum and brass show variation and peak. So there are certain variations and peaks in case of pure metals. And apparently pure metals and single crystals show high conductivity. Why? Because electrons do not scatter at impurities and grain boundaries. So these electrons, actually these are free electrons, they are not scattered around only the grain boundaries and the impurities. That's why they show very good thermal conductivity, the pure metals. Then there are the insulators. So the insulators, as we have discussed already also, these are required. Why? Because we don't want to the heat to leak out very quickly in certain places, like in industrial practices, equipment and domestic appliances. And these materials are basically those which do not have free electrons, like we discussed earlier. They don't have free electrons in their structure, and heat conduction is only due to the lattice vibration in the form of elastic waves. Such elastic vibrations are affected by impurity atoms and defects like the grain boundaries, vacancies and dislocations. So these elastic vibrations will be affected by these things like the grain boundaries, vacancies and dislocations. So that's why they are not so good thermal conductors. Then there is interference also between the elastic waves and the defects, and this is known as, and these cause the anisotropy of the heat conductivity, meaning the thermal this conductivity will not be same in all the directions. So one thing it can be easily understood is that the crystalline materials, in their case, interference will actually reduce with decreasing temperature, and further what will happen, there will be increase in the thermal conductivity. So in crystalline materials, if we are decreasing temperature, then that interference between the elastic waves and the defects will lessen. So there will be better conduction and the thermal conductivity will increase. But in case of amorphous materials, what will happen? These interferences are very less actually because of their structure. So in this case, the reverse thing will happen, that with increasing temperature, thermal conductivity will increase. Like you can see in the graph, there is one amorphous substance, that is the glass, and the other one is the graphite, which is a crystalline substance. So you can see that as the temperature is increasing, the thermal conductivity of graphite is going down, whereas in case of glass it is going up. So there are certain classifications of insulators also. So the first one is the low temperature insulators. These are based on the temperature effects. So first one is low temperature insulators. They are generally used up to only 10 degrees centigrade. And these are actually made of porous polymeric materials, and they may carry gases also which freeze in pores to create certain kind of vacuum. And this vacuum is a much better insulator. It terminates the elastic waves which we discussed earlier. Such insulators generally, because of the low temperature where they are used in cryogenic applications, because cryogenic application means low temperature application. Further, the second classification is the building insulators. They are used in a range of 10 degrees centigrade to 150 degrees centigrade, and they are made up of plastics and wood generally. And the third category is the industrial insulators. The temperature range goes from 150 degree to 315 degrees centigrade. And the category which falls under this type of industrial insulator are the bricks and concrete materials. And these are further insulated by minerals, glasses, lagos, all these things we may have seen in industry if we had made a visit there. And other inorganic powders also, which are filled between sheets. And the last one is the high temperature insulator, and this one is used in the range above 315 degrees centigrade. And the materials which come under this category are porous ceramic bricks for refractory and ceramic powders, and these are used as insulators at these temperatures. So this one is a figure for the thermal conductivity as functions of temperature. So temperature is on x-axis and thermal conductivity is on the y-axis. So different materials are given there. You can see magnesite is there, fused alumina is there. So different materials behave differently. And why it is happening? Again, because of that effect of amorphous and crystalline substance. So crystalline substance will follow the graph of the graphite, whereas the amorphous ones will follow the graph of the glass curve. And their thermal conductivity will increase with temperature, whereas in case of crystalline materials, thermal conductivity will decrease with temperature. And there are certain other classifications of these insulators and refractory materials depending upon the types of practical applications. The first one is the porous polymeric materials reach very high insulating properties at low temperatures, so they are used there. And porous refractories or ceramic powder insulators are used in high temperature applications, particularly above 550 degrees centigrade. For practical applications, the insulators are classified as, the first one is known as the loose fill. So what is there in the loose fill? Loose fill insulators are applied to structure as pouring or foaming. So you can say it's a kind of a liquid type, because liquid can be poured, solid cannot be poured. And the materials used are like minerals, glasses, slag wools and inorganic powders. So they may be as a pouring type or a foaming type. So some things are in the form of foam also, like slag wools and all. And foam plastics such as isonate can also be used as loose fill insulator. Then the second category is the ready to fit one. Like you may have seen in industries, we have paper sheets, cloth sheets. All these things can act as insulators. Wire mesh type, this is very common. So this is a fibrous material. Then there are also blankets of ready to fit insulators. Like in the common life also, you see if somebody is burning, something is burning, we try to put blanket on it. So this kind, a general example. And then the third category is the rigid insulator. So this comprises of wood, sugarcane fibers, corkboard, foam glass, foam plastics, rubber. All these come under rigid insulators, because they can be formed into boards or slabs which work as rigid type. Insulating bricks are also there. So bricks is also a rigid type. Why we are calling rigid? Because you know rigidity definition, that the distance between 2 points doesn't change when we are applying certain force. So that thing can be called as rigid. The outer surface of insulators used for high temperature insulation attain temperature higher than the surroundings. And what will happen due to this? This will cause heat loss by convection and radiation modes of heat transfer. So now we will discuss another property, that is called the specific heat. This is also a very important property, and it is defined as the amount of heat absorbed in the solid for 1 degree rise in temperature per unit mass. So if you have, suppose 1 kg of a certain substance, then if the temperature of that substance has to rise by 1 degree centigrade, we have to give certain amount of heat to it, and that heat is known as the specific heat. So there were two scientists, Dulong and Petit. They gave a law in 1819 that states that the molar specific heat for all elementary solid materials is same, and its value has been shown to be around 6 calorie per mole. So molar you must have studied in chemistry, the molar term, atomic weight is there. So according to that, all elements have the same this specific heat. But when we come in terms of kg or grams, then the specific heat will vary. So heat absorption of a solid material, what it is actually, it depends on the internal energy. It is equal to the internal energy, and internal energy in turns is a combination of two things, that is the kinetic energy of atom vibrations plus the kinetic energy of the electrons. So you have the atom also and you have free electrons also. So kinetic energy of both these things, when they are summed up, they will be known as internal energy, and it will be further given as heat absorption of the solid material. The specific heat actually reaches a constant value in the range of most applications from room temperature. So around the room temperature, specific heat is constant. And diamond is one substance whose specific heat increases continuously when up to 1000 degrees centigrade. So diamond is one kind of exception whose specific heat actually goes on increasing up to 1000 degree centigrade. So now we talk about a very important term, that is the thermal stresses. Why these thermal stresses are actually coming in, and we are going to discuss it on molecular level. So in the given figure, if you see that outer surface of the material is at higher temperature than its inside. So what will happen? There will be a thermal gradient across the thickness. The surface layer will try to expand, while the inner material, what it will do? It will try to apply a restraint on the outer material. So it doesn't allow the surface to expand, and due to this, stress will come in. So the outer material or the surface material will experience compressive stress because the inner one is trying to push it, whereas the inner one will experience a tension because the outer one is pulling it. So due to this, cracks can develop, and in combination of loss of yield strength at higher temperature, cracks will come up at around 45 degree, and these failures may be due to shear. Mostly due to shear these happen at 45 degrees. So there is one more case. The second case is that in this outer surface is at a lower temperature, whereas the inner surface is at a higher temperature. So it is the reverse of the first case. So in this case, then what will happen is that the outer surface will be in tension, whereas the inner one will be in compression. So now the failure will be taking place in a direction normal to the direction of tension, meaning perpendicular to the axial direction. It will not be at 45 degree. So this was the these were the two cases of thermal stresses. As a general rule, we can say that across a thermal gradient, the hot region is always under tension, whereas the cold one is under compression. Thermal stresses arise in any body which is heated and restrained from expansion. So whenever you are restraining the specimen, then stresses will come. Like in the very first module we discussed, but you may apply a force and there is certain restriction, then only stress comes in. The restraint may be provided by part of the body at lower temperature, or it may be due to external bodies connected to the body in question. So till now we have discussed the inner type one, now we discuss the external bodies type. So stresses due to external effects. So very first example which comes into mind is the welded joints. These weldings cause a lot of stress. The materials made up of more than one material also create stresses because they may have different coefficient of thermal expansion. They generally have different coefficient of thermal expansion. Thus they suffer due to thermal stresses when heated. Like the bimetallic strip used for thermostatic control. This is a very common example. Thermocouple you must have read. In several practical applications, insulating materials in furnaces or liquid metal ladle linings are also subjected to such effects. Most refractory material, being brittle, are greatly in danger of developing surface crack due to thermal residual stresses. So refractory materials, they are generally brittle. So obviously thermal stresses will come in. Then reduction or avoiding of these cracks is very much needed, and for that we need proper structural design as well as selection of the material. Now we discuss thermal fatigue. So how it develops actually? It is very normal when we are operating things that the temperatures imposed upon a body will change. Suppose there is a plate or a sheet, you can say, and you are heating it at one end, then the temperature at the other end may be different. So such changes can be there, and this will cause alternating thermal gradients and hence alternating stresses, like we have discussed earlier mechanical fatigue also. So this is thermal fatigue. So these changing stresses will create fatigue effects in thermal, and this phenomena is known as the thermal fatigue. So there are detrimental effects due to this thermal fatigue, like the alternating thermal gradients will induce quite high stresses, and coupled with deteriorating effects of high temperature, thermal fatigue can cause failure of material in short time. Like you must have heard about the 2003 incident where Kalpana Chawla, the scientist from India, died. So that was also a kind of a thermal failure of the material. We say structural failure also, but that was coming due to the high temperature in the atmosphere. But we have a saving grace here, that the frequency of temperature changes is quite low and not as high as we studied earlier in case of the mechanical type of stresses, and thus it falls in category of high strain low cycle fatigue. After discussing the thermal fatigue, there is one phenomena also known as the thermal shock. So we discuss it here. If there is a steep change in temperature, it may cause sudden application of high stress, like the impact thing we have studied earlier, and this happens because of the sudden cooling or heating. However, sudden and fast cooling is more dangerous than heating, because cooling of outer surface results in tensile stresses on the surface, like we have seen earlier. The surface becomes weaker than the inside and is subjected to higher stress and worse operating conditions. And this situation becomes more dangerous in case of the refractory bricks, which are brittle materials. So if the surface damage is taking place earlier, refractory bricks are brittle and they can damage from the top. So when we talk about thermal shock, then we also need to know about the resistance to thermal shock, because then only we can gauge out how good our material is to prevent cracks and all these things, damage. So this thermal shock is measured in terms of force only, that is given here as capital P, and it is dependent on our ultimate tensile strength given as sigma u, modulus of elasticity given as capital E, coefficient of thermal expansion given as A, small a, and density small r, specific heat capital C, and thermal conductivity capital K. So here is the formula. You can see it is given as sigma u divided by capital E into root capital K divided by rho. So this is the expression for our resistance to thermal shock. So you can see from this expression that if K is high, then what will happen? Our resistance will be better to thermal shock, because then it will permit heat to pass through. If thermal conductivity is good, then heat can pass through easily. On the contrary, if you see capital E is more or rho is more, density is more, then what will happen? That the resistance will come down. So from this thermal resistance, thermal shock resistance thing, we can see that refractory materials have low ultimate tensile strength as well as low thermal conductivity, and reduced thermal shock resistance results in spoiling of surface caused by compressive stresses due to fast heating. Pyrex glass and fused silica are two types of materials which have low value of A and hence better thermal shock resistance, because A was in the denominator in that formula if you see. Similarly, metals are there. They have apparently very high thermal shock resistance. Why? Because they have higher values of ultimate tensile strength and also of thermal conductivity. So they have high values and they come in this numerator. So metals have better resistance to thermal shock. And the last one, that is the plastic materials, actually have low values of E, that is Young's modulus, and Young's modulus is coming in the denominator in that formula which I have shown earlier. So they will have better thermal shock resistance. So in this session we saw that we have covered the certain number of properties, that is thermal properties, and further we saw different kinds of materials also, like the insulators, their classifications, all these things, and the refractory materials, what are the refractory materials. We have covered all these things in this session, and further session will comprise of other things in this particular unit. Thank you very much.